Well, very few people can say they've kept as close an eye on the Delaware economy as John Stapleford, both while he was at Moody's.com and as the head of the Caesar Rodney Institute.
And that's why we've invited him to be part of State of Play this week. John, thanks for being here. Welcome.
Happy to be here.
So let's talk about the Delaware economy. It seems like the jobless rate here in Delaware has stayed at 7% or right there above 7%. For months now. What's really caused it to get stuck there? What can get it down?
At the high point, we were up around 8.5%, which is very unusual because historically the unemployment rate in Delaware has been 3.5%, so about 15,000 unemployed. We were up to 36,000. Now we're around 32,000 people unemployed, and then another 4,000 discouraged workers and another 27,000 marginally attached. So the overall unemployment rate is around 14% plus. And the month-to-month changes in the unemployment rate aren't necessarily very telling because it's all sample-based data. But in July, the unemployment rate actually went up from 7.2 to 7.3%, and the labor force went down by 3,000. So you have, your denominator, the labor force shrinking, and yet the unemployment rate's still going up. And I'm sure part of that, for this particular period of time, might be AstraZeneca related, but it's a very difficult time. It's not a difficult time for college graduates. It's a difficult time for people with a high school degree or less. That's where the real pain and suffering has been.
So what do you do? What's the solution? Is there one?
Well, the things you think of immediately, and they run counter to what the state has been doing, but the first thing is you want to have a vibrant local business community. And over the last 15 years, Delaware businesses have ranked 50th in the nation in their rate of creation of jobs. And 80% of the new jobs in any economy in the United States come from existing businesses. So right away, our primary source, and you say, well, what could be done with them? Well, we raised the gross receipts tax 34%. We raised the personal income tax top rate 17%. That discourages small businesses. And then our electric costs, we've been implementing all kinds of green energy programs. You could argue back and forth about the merits, but our electric rate, industrial electric rate, is 26% above the nation, which kills you for attracting corporations. And then the third thing with regards to the labor force and people with high school degrees or less is you've got the highest dropout rate for freshmen in the region. 1/3 of the children in 8th grade in Delaware Public Schools can read or do math with proficiency. That drops down to about 18% for minorities. What are those kids going to do 5 years from now when they get out of high school? SAT scores are dropping. So you look at the performance of public schools and you say, doing things at the margin, like race to the top federal money or whatever, we need a more substantive change in the public schools for these kids to then have a chance. And I guess the last thing I'd throw in there is the importance of community colleges. For those people who do have a high school degree but are struggling to find a well-paying job. And by the way, over the last 5 years, and you probably know this at WHYY, salaries have not kept pace with inflation.
I want to talk about DFAC now. You
Sure.
Look at the numbers. They're either steady or on the rise. I think this year it was in the neighborhood of 50+ million. What does that number tell you?
Well, what happened was, and I was part of the cause. Coming into 2008 in a recession, DFAC way over projected revenues. And so the state was budgeting and throwing out all kinds of money that it didn't have, and then things crashed and burned. This time, they're actually being overly cautious. And I would say for this fiscal year that we're in right now, fiscal 14, which ends in June of 2014, I'd say they're underestimating. So there is going to continue to be a surplus. Like it was 80 million at the end of fiscal year 13 in June. I think it's going to be another surplus. The question is, what do you do with it? Now, what they did with the surplus this time is they gave, for example, $8 million to the casinos. Okay, and the casinos are not nonprofits, as far as I know. what I'd much rather see, if we know that this coming fiscal year, there in fact is going to be or very likely will be a surplus again, lower taxes, particularly lower taxes on businesses. It's counterintuitive to raise taxes in a recession and expect an economy to grow.
Were you surprised then that the tax increases that were proposed to sunset this year were kind of pulled back then because of that?
I was flabbergasted, and what people don't realize, the general fund is about $3.6 billion. The state spends a total of over $8 billion because it has all these special funds. And so what you're saying when you don't allow those taxes to sunset, we're spending $8 billion and we can find no efficiencies. That's hard to grasp.
So let's talk about Fisker. You were an early critic of the deal, and now it looks like cars will not be built there, but short of cars being built at that Boxwood Road plant, what would be the best case scenario for Delaware now?
I think we're looked at as kind of a mirror image of what's going on in Washington, D.C., where we're adding more regulations, we're raising taxes, we're focused on green energy, even though it's not market competitive yet. And I think by and large, we're not an attractive place. And the schools, of course, are crippling, the public schools are crippling to attracting corporations to Delaware. The governor knows this, and Alan Levin, who runs the Delaware Economic Development Office, they both know all these things. The electric costs are crippling. I mean, that's why they gave Fisker $9 million to cut their electric bill. So it's back to fundamentals. People and firms can move with their feet. They can relocate. And the firms that are here are not looking around and saying, gee, this is a going place. This is a place where government is supportive of what we're trying to do. And to give you a sense of that, over 10 years, the Delaware Economic Development Office has given out $200 million of grants and loans. And you say, oh, well, including Fisker. At the same time, businesses in Delaware invested $57 billion. Okay, so 200 million is what, like less than 1/10 of 1% of 57 billion. So what's more important is chump change that we throw out in grants and loans, or the conditions that drive business investment here. So, and at this point, we don't see anything meaningful being done.
One more thing, sort of along lines with Fisker, a company that the state has drawn here with some of those incentives. Bloom Energy going to start producing. I know it's a favorite whipping boy of yours, but they're going to start producing. The Bloom boxes are going to start rolling off the lines here fairly soon. Is it a good thing that they're up and running and contributing?
I think if you give any company a $1 billion subsidy over 25 years, they should be able to make it. And the $1 billion subsidy, guess where it's coming from? Electric ratepayers in Delaware, who already have electric rates well above the nation. And so does that make sense? Is that a way to stimulate an economy? But to be hired there, though, you have to wear bloomers, I was told, which is, I think, for a lot of people going to be a problem.
So should the state not try to be competitive and not try to woo new business? I mean, can they do both? Can they invest in businesses here in the state as well as still be competitive by luring more businesses here, even if it's a risk?
Business people, and you know this, what's been going on in TV and internet, business people sit down and look at the bottom line. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have productive workers coming out of your public schools, if you don't have competitive tax rates, if you don't have energy costs that are competitive, if you have a proactive union representation in the legislature, you're neither going to attract many businesses nor are you going to encourage the existing businesses to grow. If I said to you, tomorrow we're going to start taking 30% out of your paycheck, would you work harder or would you work less? I mean, it's not, economics is not rocket science.
Well, we'd be pretty unhappy. Okay, well, John Stapleford of the Caesar Rodney Institute, thank you. Always interesting. We appreciate the conversation.